Now we're in the third module in which we are going to look at your gifts, how to discern them, and more importantly, how to offer them with generosity. But I need to start us way back in the universe, or at least on this planet. Let's start with the planet. This is a generous planet, and that is not a new age concept. That is a scientific principle. And the reason it's a scientific principle is because the basic unit of life is relationships. Nothing living lives alone, and nothing can be seen in terms of energy until it's in relationship. So, just with that fact of how the universe organizes itself, we can state it has to be generous, right? Because you don't want conflict, you don't want competition. We've been brought up to believe that everything is competitive, that the best wins, that it's nature fighting tooth and claw, which was attributed to Darwin in his understanding of evolution. But in fact, everything is systems of cooperation that are necessary for one's survival. So, generosity, not being protective, not being competitive, not being destructive in our relationships, is how we bring more life into everything. When a predator species appears, what they do is they take over with competition and they destroy that wonderful fabric of interdependencies. And that's why they destroy whole ecosystems. Now, the word ecosystem is quite popular these days. Finally, we're starting to realize that we exist in networks of interdependencies. And interdependencies are very important phrase, much better than interrelated, because interdependency means we cannot exist without the other. So we used to call this symbiosis. I remember learning it as feeling a state of wonder, but it was like a rare event. And now it is symbiotic planet, as Lynn Margulis told us in her science research on microorganisms many decades ago now. So we live on a necessarily generous, interdependent planet. Nothing living lives alone because we are not a single being. So the human body is 57% microorganisms. We have the human genome and we have the biome genomes because they have millions of genes more than we do. We are 57% dependent on these microorganisms for everything in our bodies. And this concept is called the World Wide Web by Carolyn Simart's work on finding the mother tree. It's when we speak about mycelium and mycelial root systems, that's the fabric of the soil. That's the fabric of the earth. This intense, living, thriving, always seeking, moving out in relationship. There is no single organism, whether it's a plant or an animal, that lives alone inside itself. So coral have algae to create their food, and that's why we have coral bleaching now, because the algae die. Everywhere now, our biology is getting clear of the density, intensity, and miraculous nature of interdependency. So, generosity is a requirement. Now, peoples around the world, indigenous peoples, ancient peoples who lived close to the earth, knew this. They knew that they were a relative, a participant, and they could not survive without this deep knowledge of their relatives and how they behaved and what they needed. So, this interdependent world is still held for us today in indigenous cultures and in peoples who have been in the same place on the earth, knowing where they live, knowing the complexity of relationships. And that wisdom is still available to us, but we haven't been listening. Now, I have worked a lot in South Africa, and my first experience of speaking to a group was in 1997. A man came up to me. I was talking about order for free, the self organizing nature of the universe, quantum theory, complexity science. It's all about networks of interdependency. So he rushed up to me and he said, Margaret, you need to know about Ubuntu. And I started learning. And every time I went to South Africa and then Zimbabwe, both cultures I had deep connection to, I would be curious and I would ask people, so what does Ubuntu mean? It was given a definition. A person is only a person through other people. Wow. I exist through you and you exist through we. And the ultimate one, which I would like us to ponder, is I am because you are. I am because you are. Please give that some time. And we will now start to talk about the terrifying imprisonment we've had from Western culture, where we believe it is isolated individuals fighting for survival on their own. So, Archbishop Desmond Tutu put it this way as a contrast. He said, in Western culture, you say, I think, therefore I am, which is nonsense, by the way. It's I am, therefore I can think. But we'll let that go for now. But what Tutu said was, we don't think that way. We exist in a bundle of belonging, and I only exist through you. Let's think about our own culture, which teaches us that it's all a transaction. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I owe you something. And these are all very common phrases that are a total transactional nature, right? If you give me this, I'll give you that, or it's payback time. My least favorite phrase that I would ask you all to never use if you do is when we say, thank you for having me, as if I'm granting you the privilege of being here. That is not Ubuntu. That is transaction. And many, many people now have been commenting on this transactional nature of relationships because it's killing us, right? A person is only a person through other people. So the more we feel that we're in this tit for tat, I'll help you if you help me, it's led to where we are, super competitive. And it's just watch what has changed in professional sports games. But if we want to return to what is true, a truth about life, we need to be able to focus on generosity. And we will cover that in a few minutes. But I also want to tell you another story that was a real comeuppance for me of the difference between protecting oneself as an individual and understanding you're part of a community. So I was working for a foundation, and there were a lot of Americans there, and we'd been together. It was a 3-year program. And there were also 2 women from Nigeria there, younger women. So we white Americans were struggling with whether we should invite in our friends and family who were with us. They were staying at the same place, but they were not allowed into the inner sanctum of our meetings. That conversation was nauseating, it really was. Like, well, I don't know if I could speak the truth if, we've developed a covenant of trust here, and I would feel vulnerable. I would feel exposed if we brought in people that I don't know. Finally, this 28-year-old Nigerian woman just said, I can't believe you're having this conversation. These people are relatives, not blood relatives, but everyone in our culture, and this is true throughout Africa, is a brother, a sister, an auntie, an uncle, or a mother, father, grandmother, grandfather. We don't talk about cousins. And think about in Western culture, am I the first cousin twice removed, or is that a second cousin? The kind of nonsense we go through, which is all self-protection, locating ourselves as an individual within a family, within a community, and in this case, within a meeting space. So she really called us up short on this self-protected individualism. She said, everyone is family to us. Why wouldn't they be here? They are family. I also learned in South Africa that when someone would invite me to a party, I was expected to bring everyone who was with me at the time of the invitation. I even did this when I was invited to meet Archbishop Tutu. The people who were driving me there, I said, well, of course you should come in. He'll understand. Well, he did understand, but his white secretary was horrified that I brought a small group rather than just me and my colleague to meet him. So this is something for us all to think about because we need to move into generosity. We need to be in relationships where we truly offer ourselves, not for what we will get or gain, but for what we can offer as a gift. I want to say one more thing in contrast. What do you think the word entangled means? It is the new word in science, in understanding this is entangled life. And I will recommend a book by Merlin Sheldrake, Rupert Sheldrake's son, called Entangled Life, because it's a book about mycelium, about fungi, about microorganisms that actually form this web of life on the earth and work within people. These microorganisms, these mycelium, are everywhere, and we couldn't live without them. We only see them as mushrooms, but that's just the fruit. Anyway, I'll give you a reference to this book, which is just constantly gobsmacking, really understanding the intelligence and wonder of these small mycelial networks and how they operate. So that's a good use of the word entangled. But if you look it up in a Western dictionary, of course I've done this, the word entangled is an uncomfortable term. It's like, oh, I should avoid being entangled because it's going to cost me something. So I love looking at these words that are now coming into us and into our expressions. Ecosystems, yes. Entanglement, wow, we still have a ways to go with that. Symbiotic relationships, so. We don't really use that very much, but we do use collaboration and we do use co-learning. And anytime you put the co in front of whatever the action is, then we are tuning in to the way that life works with an intense, interdependent, beyond belief, interdependent world that we either benefit from or we stay in self-protection. So now we're going to talk about how we identify our gifts.
Find out more on advire.life.